These are fungus farming ants which live in Central and South America. They're amazing creatures. They don't actually eat the plants that they gather themselves. They gather plants, huge quantities of leaves, which they cut, beautifully cut with little scissor jaws, and then carry them back to the nest, where they use them as compost to grow a fungus. And it's the fungus that they actually eat. The fungus produces sprouting mushrooms, and they eat those. So the ants gather the compost on which the fungus grows. Huge colonies, gigantic colonies of these fungus-growing ants. They're farming ants. Now, unfortunately, there's another species of fungus, which is a pest. It's a crop pest, which specializes only in growing on the ant's own fungus. So this fungus uniquely grows in ants' nests, nowhere else, and this pest uniquely grows on the fungus, which is the crop that the ants grow. It's an astonishing analogy to human farming, and it gets even better. The ants go around and actually control the pest, actually eat off the pest fungus to, just like a farmer weeding. They go around weeding, and it's been shown experimentally that if you remove the ants, then the pest flourishes. As long as the ants are there, the pest is kept down. But there's another way in which the pest is kept down. On the back of the ant's neck there are little patches which are bacteria. And the bacteria grow there, and they only grow there, and they secrete an antibiotic which attacks the pest, which attacks the fungus which the ants grow. It's a very, very complicated symbiotic relationship between ants, the fungus that they grow, the pest that attacks the fungus, and the bacteria that grows on the ants that attacks the pest. Humans and chimpanzees parted company in evolution about 6 million years ago from a common ancestor. The human genome and the chimpanzee genome have both been completely sequenced, and this is a small section of part of the genome that matches. If we follow along here, human chimp, go all the way along here, all the way along here, they're all identical. Differences between the two are indicated by a little man who is in fact Svante Parbo, a very distinguished Swedish geneticist now working in Germany. It's a little game of find Parbo. Follow along this row here, chimp, human, identical, identical, identical. There's a difference. Walk along, walk along, walk along, all the same, identical, no difference at all between the human and the chimpanzee, exactly the same, exactly the same. Now we see another difference there, A versus G. Walk along, walk along, walk along, and there are no more differences in that whole row. Almost all of the human genome and the chimpanzee genome is identical. A tiny number of differences account for all the really quite large differences that we see between humans and chimpanzees. This is the skeleton of a diatom. It's a microscopic plant, an alga. It lives in lakes, in pond scum, and the skeleton is a beautiful, intricate, lacy structure, and the beauty of it is that it fossilizes. If you look in ponds widespread over the United States, you'll find a diatom called Stephanodiscus niagarae. It's very, very common. But if you look in Yellowstone Lake, you find a unique species which is only found there, Stephanodiscus yellowstonensis. If you take a core sample from the mud below the lake, underneath the lake, you find Stephanodiscus niagarae at 14,000 years old. 14,000 years ago, the climate was cold and wet, and the diatoms were just the same as the diatoms in the rest of the country. But as you look in more and more recent core samples, 12,000 years, 10,000 years, you get a gradual change. from Stephanodiscus niagari, gradually changes through all these transitional forms. At about this point, it becomes recognizable 10,000 years ago, it becomes recognizable as Yellowstonensis, and goes on to today, where it is Yellowstonensis. These are definitely two different species. The differences between them are quite subtle. You have to find out by counting ribs and spines. And if you do that, as you go along this timeline, you see the change gradually occurring. This is a perfect example of intermediates in the fossil record showing the complete history of the evolution of a new species. Both the marine and land iguanas of Galapagos resemble land iguanas found on the South American mainland, about 600 miles to the east. No doubt it was a freak accident that delivered them first to the newly formed volcanic islands of Galapagos. Thereafter, the fact that there were several different islands in the archipelago enabled them to diverge. The marine iguana, which is found nowhere but on Galapagos, presumably evolved on one island only at first, then later spread to the other islands, where they diverged into all the different varieties that are now found. This is a land iguana. It was land iguanas that first colonized the Galapagos Islands and then evolved separately into the modern land iguanas here and the marine iguanas on the separate islands. The original colonizers would have been land iguanas that floated across probably on maybe a fallen tree or something like that, perhaps in a hurricane. This has been known to happen in the West Indies. It's actually been recorded. Fallen trees in a very, very high wind blown across from one island to another, bearing a great load of iguanas, which then immediately, as soon as the tree is blown ashore, rush out and start to colonize the new island. So it's actually been seen to happen on another species in another place, but it's pretty clear that something like that is what would have happened here. If species were individually created to fit their environment, we should expect islands and continents to have the same animals and plants as similar islands and continents on the other side of the world. But this is exactly what we do not find. The distribution of animal and plant species over the islands and continents of the world follows exactly the pattern we should expect if they have evolved, and exactly the pattern we should not expect if they had been created. Island archipelagos like Galapagos are famous as nurseries of evolution, and equally famous as a nursery of evolution is the Hawaiian archipelago. It's a string of islands, and they're very, very young. The oldest island is only about 5.5 million years old, and the youngest island is only about 500,000 years old. And they're strung out like a necklace. There's a tectonic plate moving that way, moving over a hotspot, a volcanic hotspot, which is punching through and making islands. And so it made that one first, then that one, then that one, then those ones, and now most recently the big island of Hawaii. That means that all the evolution that's gone on in the Hawaiian archipelago has happened within the last few million years. And one of the most spectacular examples is fruit flies, Drosophila. Drosophila are well known as experimental animals throughout the rest of the world, but on Hawaii, they're especially famous as beautifully sexually selected. They're kind of insect versions of peacocks. There are lots and lots of species on Hawaii, and they're all different, they're all gorgeously colored and shaped, and it's all because of sexual selection, selection for the most attractive males. Here's a family tree of 5 different species of Hawaiian Drosophila, and it's no accident that the oldest split is between the flies on the oldest islands, and then as you go to successively younger islands, you get successively more recent splits between the species of fly. Drosophila flies show the most elegant courtship behavior. You can see here a male courting a female. The late John Maynard Smith, who was one of the great evolutionary biologists, used to do a wonderful imitation of fruit flies courting, the courtship display of fruit flies, flapping his coattails in a most wonderfully comic way. Every species does it in a different way. They display the differences between the wing patterns and the other characteristic differences between the species. They also have song, a sort of sequence of buzzing noises which are characteristic of the species, quite complicated, like cricket song, but different, of course. It's made by vibrating the wings, and every species has a different kind of song, a different pattern of song, and the females of the species recognize it. These are Nazca boobies, related to the blue-footed boobies, and boobies are in turn related to gannets, which we have in Britain. Brian Nelson showed in gannets that they always lay just one egg, but rather puzzlingly, if he added an extra egg, they were often able to rear the chick. The gannets are a bit of a mystery. Why, if they are capable of rearing 2 chicks, don't they? One of the virtues of true science is that we admit it when we don't understand something, and it stimulates us to do more work. Maybe the gannets evolved their one-egg habit during a time when food was less plentiful, and they haven't yet caught up with present-day conditions. Now, these Nazca boobies always lay 2 eggs, but the second chick always dies. And I suppose we should see the second chick from a Darwinian point of view as a kind of insurance against the possibility of the first one dying. The elder chick hatches about 5 days before the younger one. If the elder chick is still alive, it promptly kills the younger one. The parent makes no effort to restrain the murderer or assist the victim. But if the elder chick happens to be dead before the younger one arrives, the younger one serves as the insurance policy. Blue-footed boobies achieve a similar insurance in an interestingly different way. The elder sibling doesn't kill the younger one, but it gets first go at all the food the parents bring. The younger chick therefore starves to death, unless the elder one happens to be dead, or unless it's a bumper year and there's enough food for both. This is a more subtle kind of insurance policy, because the parents occasionally manage to rear 2 chicks. Bringing 2 chicks into the world so that one may die seems horribly cruel to us, but natural selection has no pity. The genes that implement this callous insurance policy get passed down through the generations in the bodies of the surviving chicks, usually the elder one, sometimes the younger one. But what does a creationist make of it? Is the creator a cruel monster? Or is he just incompetent?